Today on the MrMaple Show podcast, Matt and Tim count down the top 25 Japanese maples for containers.
Konnichiwa, y'all, and welcome to another MrMaple podcast. We appreciate you joining us here. We're going to be doing a countdown for you guys. We're going to be talking about our top 25 trees for container gardening. If you hadn't found us already, thanks for joining. I'm glad you got here. We do a podcast once a week. They're on all major podcast platforms. And you can also watch the video components to these on the MrMaple Show YouTube. We'd love to have you be part of that.
And we have lots of countdowns that we go and do where we do the top 25 Japanese maples for beginners, or we do the top 25 most heat tolerant Japanese maples. Today, with the containers, we thought we'd sort of hit y'all up with something with a unique perspective. We have a whole podcast on how to grow Japanese maples in containers. That's a full podcast directly about that. But before we get into this top 25, let's talk just a small minute about the containers. And if you want a more in-depth podcast about that, do go check out that other podcast.
Number one on that list, get rid of the saucer of death. That's my number one advice. You'll see a lot of containers that come with a catch basin at the bottom of them. You don't want that on a Japanese maple container. One, it's going to freeze. It's going to add to issues, but it's going to slow your drainage down. You see those little diagrams on Facebook where people say, where does the water go first? Well, if you've got that catch basin, the water goes into your roots and they cause fungal issues. So you don't want that going on. You're going to get root rot and so many more problems. If you're holding water in your container, you want very good drainage.
Yeah, drainage is key when it comes to Japanese maples. You don't want water to sit on the tree. You want it to get wet and then to dry out. And those saucers of death are just things that just hold the water down there at the very bottom of the roots.
Great punk band, Saucers of Death.
But it causes the tree to catch fungal infections on the roots. And that's what you don't want to happen. You don't want to fight off a root rot. You want that tree to get wet and then to dry out. And also remember that containers are great, but they may need to be protected in the winter, especially if you're in a zone 5. Japanese maples are good zones 5 through 9. When you put them in a container, raising the roots up above the soil, you've basically created a situation where the tree itself needs to be protected during those winter months, especially in that zone 5.
So those are some of the basic tips. Again, go watch our full podcast. We give lots of informational stuff out on Japanese maples every single day here on the MrMaple Show and on this podcast. So you can go and get filled in on tons more information there. Today, we're kind of giving you an overview. This top 25 is kind of our picks today for great plants for containers. It's a good starting spot for you. So if you're looking to garden with Japanese maples in pots, this is a great place to kind of start out and give you some ideas and maybe get you started on a path that'll lead to Japanese gardening in containers.
Yeah, containers is a way to expand your garden to your patio, to your driveway, to your front porch, your back porch, and allow you to have plants in areas where there's not garden soil naturally. And so it's a great way to be able to do this with Japanese maples. Japanese maples have shallow, non-invasive roots, which make them great for bonsai, but also make them great for containers. And it's one of the best trees to grow in containers because of that shallow, non-invasive root system that they have.
So let's jump right in, guys. Starting out here at number 25, we've got Scarlet Princess. I've sometimes seen this tree listed as Ash's Scarlet Princess. It's by Tom and Nancy Ash. But this tree came to us from Tom Ash as Scarlet Princess, so we always keep the original name on it. This is a witch's broom on Crimson Queen that stays even smaller than Crimson Queen, making it perfect for container culture.
I know Matt and I had Tom and Nancy Ash presenting at the Maple Society meeting in Asheville. And as part of this, we convinced them to bring us a Scarlet Princess that then we could produce. And so that was really cool to hear them present on how they prune Japanese maples. But that's how they found this witch's broom, is they were out there pruning on a larger Japanese maple or Crimson Queen. And they found this as a dwarf mutation and they started grafting it. And it really is something kind of unique. It has a very different shape than a typical lace leaf and a typical witch's broom. Being that a lace leaf is typically weeping, this has this unusual, dense, compact habit that is both upright and weeping at the same time.
Yeah, great colors on this one too. It actually has a slightly different color change than Crimson Queen. You'll get some really nice pink reds in the early spring. All around, just a great plant for durability, for the container. And that smaller stature at around 3 feet by 3 feet, even in 10 years in the ground, makes it much smaller for the container. Now, you'll find that many of these plants, by putting them in a container, stay a little bit smaller than they would in the ground. They don't grow at the same rate sometimes they would in the landscape. This is one that's going to stay nice and small, kind of grow to the size container you have it in, and make a perfect specimen for the small garden.
And Scarlet Princess has proven to be more heat tolerant. One thing to keep in mind with all these container plants we'll be talking about, though, is when you have a container in full sun, the container itself heats up and its roots also heat up. So plants will be less heat tolerant in a container than they will in the shade.
Yeah, we always recommend giving your containers late day shade typically, even in our area. We're in zone 6B in western North Carolina. We're in a very mild sun climate, so our heat index is not very high here. Most of our Japanese maples, unless they're getting watered, daily, need some late day shade in containers. So you want to take that into precaution as well. So coming in here at number 24, what do we got, Tim?
Next up, we've got Acer Pomatum Pixie. This is a dwarf compact red upright that can be a little more columnar in its shape. The thing that strikes me the most about Pixie, though, is the brighter pink-red color that you get on the leaves themselves. It's a little more picked up and just grabs people's attention because it's not your typical maroon in that early springtime.
Great color patterns. I love that it can get to a darker color with that pink or new growth in the summer as well. Very heat tolerant, very dense in its structure. So a lot of times people look at this and almost think it's Macawi Atsubusa light because it's so dense. A smaller overall upright in that 6 to 8 foot range, even in 20 years in the ground, even 15 years in the ground. So it's going to give you a much smaller platform, making it great for the container garden. Now, Pixie you can grow in a container for say up to 8 to 10 years. And then put the thing in the ground and have a bigger, nice size, mid-sized tree. So it's a great way to start Pixie off. I do think long term you'll want to get Pixie to a very large container or into the ground.
Yeah, I fell in love with this tree down at Richard Bomar's. Richard was a good friend of ours, is a good friend of ours. He was actually here the other day helping out, clean up after some of the hurricane stuff, helping get some of the poly off the greenhouses that had ripped. Down at his home, he had a large Pixie in the ground. And he just kept talking about, look how tight and dense this tree is. Mm-hmm. Look at the colors. And Matt,
man obsessed with Macawi Atsubusa, and he can't get over Pixie either. There's a lot of good things there.
Yeah, there's a lot of good things going on with Pixie when you actually just see a specimen in the landscape. And it made Matt and I realize, hey, this tree has a lot of value. It's not just another red upright. It's not just another red dwarf. This one has a texture that's nice. It has some colors that make this tree stand out. And it does that in a container very well as well. The more this tree grows, the more you're going to grow to appreciate Pixie.
Now, Tim mentioned it earlier too, but most of these Japanese maples we're going to be talking about today are going to work zones 5 through 9. Now, in the container, it takes us down to one zone. So you're going to want to remember that most of these are going to be 6 through 9 in the container. We're actually here in zone 6B in western North Carolina, and all of our trees are in containers pretty much unheated all year. Some get protected in a light cold frame or poly house. But they're going to do great in pots. Don't be afraid to put maples in pots, but make sure to not have those roots exposed in zone 5.
Matt, what do we got next at number 23?
At number 23, the Michael Jordan spot, we've got Kodo Maru.
That's the GOAT, the greatest of all time spot. I mean, that's a difficult one.
And really, Michael Jordan's number 1. That's just his number.
But Kodo Maru or Kodo Maru, however you pronounce it, this is one of the tightest, densest green witch's brooms that's on the market.
Yeah, love that. This one almost reminds me more of a kohime style with the broom aesthetic. So you're going to get that tight, compact broom shape, everything you love about the kohime style, but then with a short and center node. So it actually is very heat tolerant. It's very durable. I like the bubbly or rounded appearance of that short and center node too. I think it gives the overall tree a really nice texture, especially as you see, a more developed, dense one. That purple border in the early spring too is beautiful. And that short and center node just gives it something a little bit extra going on with that border. It kind of breaks the leaf up a little bit.
And it is one of the smallest of the witch's brooms that is currently out there in the market. It stays extremely tight and dense. We're talking 3 to 4 feet by 3 to 4 feet in 10 years. Sometimes in the early spring, you can get a little bit of bronze coloring around the border on this in the early spring. Kodo Maru too can have some green colors in the shade, but it can also get to this silver blue-green kind of color sometimes, which is really outstanding.
Excellent plant. Great one for the show and the display that it puts on. All right, let's move right along. Coming here at number 22, we've got Benny Hoshi.
Yeah, this is a selection. It was sort of a joint selection between Olsen, who introduced Olsen's Frosted Strawberry, and Del Aux. One of them called it Benny Hoshi, and the other one called it Ruby Stars, which is a translation of Benny Hoshi.
Yeah, beautiful plant, deep reds, pinkish new growth. One of my favorite things about this tree is it goes from the dark coloration to a golden yellow in the fall. So it really puts on a beautiful display. Now, if you have a small tree form of this in a container, it's typically going to be 6 to 8 foot, even in 10 years in the ground. So it's going to be a small stature tree, but give you some vertical interest in your pot. Now that vertical interest shows off amazingly when it goes from that deep red to the golden yellows of fall. It's going to give you a dramatic display. It's going to look really nice on your porch or patio and deck, giving you, tons of contrast, but also different looks.
Yeah, one of the first Benny Hoshis we had here at Mr. Maple is one of the reasons why we have the Area 51 collection. We had a really old Benny Hoshi that was about 5 to 6 feet in a container. It was about 10 years old, and Matt and I had went off on a trip selling Japanese maples, and Dad sold some Japanese maples while we were gone. He's like, guys, I sold that 5-gallon Benny Hoshi while we were gone, and we were like, you did not.
We need that one for production.
That was over 10 years old. And, at the time, that was a really old specimen. Luckily, we had one more that we'd put in the ground at Maplewood Gardens. But the original, one of the Benny Hoshis that we had here at Mr. Maple was one of the reasons we created the Area 51 collection, because we now say, no one has clearance to go into these areas unless you have clearance. And it started the Area 51 collection.
All right, y'all, coming here at number 21, we've got Acer japonicum gossamer. Is there anything awesomer than a gossamer in fall color? This one is amazing, guys. It's Billy Schwartz Red Maple Nursery's introduction. A lot of people wonder if it's a hybrid between japonicum and a lace leaf, or is it just the most frilly dissected japonicum you'll ever see? We don't really know. Maybe we'll have to do some genetic testing one day. An amazing plant.
Yeah, Sue Wiegroff basically said that there was a natural block between Acer japonicum and palmatum, and that's why they don't hybridize typically in the wild. Is there an exception to everything? Yeah, sometimes there is. Billy found this as a chance seedling underneath a really large-leafed Acer japonicum at Dick Wolf's place where his home and gardens were in his nursery. And it was right beside of a lace leaf. And it clearly is Acer japonicum. It clearly is a lace leaf japonicum, but it's the thinnest leaf japonicum I've ever seen, especially at a young age. Acer japonicum gossamer can look almost linerlobum. I mean, Billy even describes it that way sometimes. And then as it matures, you get thicker and thicker leaf.
3 to 4 feet tall, 3 to 4 feet wide in a 10-year span. This one's nice and dense and dwarf and compact. Now, all that packs a lot of punch in the fall because that small stature can have reds, yellows, and oranges in it. It can be one of the most amazing colored plants in the fall, but in a small, dense little ball. I love it. Looks great in a container. That unique foliage really shows off.
I mean, it is one of the slowest growing of the Acer japonicum selections. A lot of the container Japanese maples are dwarfs. All Japanese maples can be turned into container Japanese maples, but the dwarfs make the very best. They're easier to manage in a container. They can fit in a pot and stay in that pot for a longer period of time. And Gossamer does that in an awesome way because you've got everything you love about japonicums in that small stature.
All right, y'all, coming in here at number 20, we've got Acer palmatum Aagasugui. Now, this is a beautiful tree. This one is a purple to lavender reticulated upright, typically in that 5 to 6 foot range in 10 years, so a little smaller stature, making it a perfect showy plant for that small garden. When we're doing containers, you want things that don't get too big too quick, and Aagasugui really does that, but it packs a lot of punch in a little platform.
I really like what Aagasugui does. It has this semi-pendulous habit and this slow-growing habit with it. And so the branches sort of arch upward and then arch downward, creating a dramatic effect. And then you add this metallic-like reticulated variegation on top of that with one of the purplest colors you can get out of a Japanese maple. And Aagasugui packs a punch in a small space.
Really cool shades. I mean, this one can look metallic. It can look lavender. You can play with the light on this one a little bit in the container. Really get some different shades going on. I like early morning sun, late day shade on this one in a pot. really shows out. And that smaller structure, it's just perfect for the container garden. You get a little bit more vertical height like you do with that Benihoshi. So you're getting a mid-sized, small, upright container plant. Perfect for that though. And the drama is going to be great. So you can put this on your porch, especially if you have something like a white house or a house that has, brown or even a lighter colored home. The contrast of that dark purple up against that is going to just give you an amazing backdrop.
Guys, coming in next, we've got Acer Pomatum Kamagata. And Kamagata comes in at 19, and it is a rock star when it does that. This is a beautiful selection by J.D. Vertrees, who wrote the book on Japanese maples with claw-like leaves. And it has just this unique upright structure and a unique texture to the leaf because it has that sort of claw-like leaf to it. J.D.
Vertrees lists this one as a tree that's good for rock gardens. So if he's doing that, it's pretty durable. It's tough as nails. It's going to look great in the container. Now, one thing I will recommend to most people is not putting a lot of gravel on top of their container. As we go through this list, we'll keep giving you a little bit of tips for container gardening as well. Be careful with too much rock around your tree in a pot because we're already conscious of that pot heating up too much. Gravel can add increased stress and heat on a Japanese maple in a container. So you want to be careful. I like sedums and things that cool the root rather than things that are going to heat up the root. So be careful of too many rocks on top of your pot. Kamagata though, tough as nails, durable, smaller stature, miniature upright, typically again in that 6 foot range, more of a vase shape. So you're going to get more of kind of an upside down V where it starts out the base and then kind of fans out from there. Absolutely beautiful plant though. I mean, that claw-like shape gives a really interesting texture. You get a purple border to that in the early spring. You get great golden yellows to oranges in the fall. All around, just an amazing plant. In the ground, it can handle full direct sun, so your durability is going to be high on this one for in the container as well.
I was told that the name Kamagata, what it essentially translates as, is you've got this, the hand tool that people used to cut grass with. It's called a kama, and gata basically means the shape of, and that's because you've got this unique shape to the leaf that kind of looks like that hand tool that people cut grass with. I think it's either called a scythe or a sickle. Really interesting, very different, and definitely a tree that's easy to grow in a container. That durability on Kamagata is off the charts.
All right, guys, let's put another japonicum in here. Coming in at number 18, we've got Acer Japonicum Fairy Lights. This is a beautiful dwarf japonicum from down under. It's from Australia. It was introduced by Yamina Rare Plant Nursery. It's a staple at Mr. Maple as well as Buckholtz Nursery. It's a plant that we love growing at both places. The profitability on this one might be a little low because it's a slow grower, so we have to wait a little bit longer to get a nice size 1 or 3. Takes a little bit longer to finish, but it is a beautiful plant. Perfect for the container garden because of that miniature status. I love this one in the pot, especially those japonicums when they get those red tassel flowers on them. It's just like a little tree adorned with tassels with red everywhere. I love that. Especially as fairy light starts to develop, that's kind of the lights on the fairy lights to me. That light red tassel on that spring, summer green foliage.
Now, which is smaller, fairy lights or gossamer? They're very similar, and they're the slowest growing japonicums. I mean, it's hard to beat them on their slow growth. Fairy lights just puts on such a dramatic display, and I like the multicolored effect that you get out of this. It looks very Hulkamania. You get those yellows and oranges all at the same time with reds, and it is something that just lights up the garden. And that's one of the reasons it's one of our favorites here at Mr. Maple when it comes to japonicums. And it's really one of an outstanding container plant because of its small stature. Again, always make sure you give containers lots of good drainage, especially on these dwarf selections. People often make the mistake of overwatering some of these dwarf selections, especially in containers. And that's one of the issues that you can see is because these trees need less water because they are dwarf in stature.
Coming in here at number 17, we've got Acer Shirasawadum Arium, also known as Golden Full Moon. Classic upright Shirasawadum. One of the reasons we love this one for containers, especially here in the South, is we like to play around with its placement. So you can kind of move the container around so you find just the right lighting for this one. I have one in the ground in a large oak canopy near my Ukigumo, and it's amazing. I think it's a perfect spot for it. A large overstory does well. If you can give this an early morning light, though, you can get some of that translucent yellow going on in the early spring, just a glowingness to it. One of the best Shirasawadum leaves, and it just is beautiful with that yellow coloration.
Yeah, Acer Shirasawadum Arium has a special place in maple history. One, it was the logo for Dick Vandermaat's nursery. 2, it was introduced by Esfeld Nursery, and the oldest one that was ever given the name Arium resides there and was brought over by Seabold. So, I mean, we're talking about history in the making with Acer Shirasawanum Arium. It is truly a classic Japanese maple, and it's one that is still amazing today. The yellow color that this gives, the golden full moon leaf, it's so resemblant of what you think of a golden full moon Japanese maple. There's something that's just electrifying about it. There's something about it that just draws you in. So much so, even in one of the Star Wars cartoons, they originally made a forest tree that looked just like an Acer Shirasawanum Arium.
Great plant, guys. Grab you one today on Mr. Maple. Today's podcast is brought to you by the guys at MrMaple.com. Now, guys, check out number 16 here. One of our most underrated plants. This one doesn't get enough love. I think it's so next level. It looks amazing in a container, and I'm talking about Acer Pomatum Oregon Sunset.
Yeah, Oregon Sunset is a uniquely shaped Japanese maple. It has this undulating shape where it goes out and up and creates a shape and texture like no other. It has a spreading out habit but upright habit at the same time, and its slower, dense habit makes this one just stand out from the shape of it. The way it grows is just unlike anything else.
I love it. I love the weird structure of it. The fall color is really where it gets the Oregon Sunset. I mean, it's not uncommon for this one to be blazing orange with hints of red in it in the fall and yellow. But I mean, it really puts on one of the best fall color displays for a small upright red. Irregular status to it. So this one's going to have a really unique structure. Another one that tries to grow more in that vase shape, upright, kind of a V pattern, but it's wide. So this one's it's not uncommon for this tree to get about as wide as it does tall, which looks really cool in a container. Like, it gives it a really nice structure. You're going to get kind of that base going on, but then a lot of width, and then kind of a nice little plateau of foliage. So you get a great canopy going on to this one in the container. I can't say enough great things about it. I think it's super underrated, and the structure looks just amazing, especially when you grow a larger one in a pot.
It also has this unique thing where the new growth, the freshest growth, is very divided and cut, more almost like a Kamagata but red, and then it matures to a leaf that looks almost like a Rhode Island Red's leaf, like a Bloodgood style leaf. I mean, for me, it's unique in every aspect. The fall color where it gets its name, though, is just outstanding, like Matt was talking about. The shape itself, though, demands that you need to use this tree. You need to put this tree in a container and enjoy this. I mean, every time I've seen a larger specimen of this tree, I just fall in love, and I think, man, why don't I plant more Oregon Sunsets? Because this thing matures out to a specimen like no other.
And if you're a container gardener, so if you're a gardener who has multiple Japanese maples in pots, and that's your long-term plan is to grow many of these in pots, this one's going to give you such a different structure. It's going to look very different amongst your collection. It's going to give you a uniqueness with the width and the shape. I think you're going to really enjoy it, and it's going to add a bit of diversity to that container garden as well.
Coming in at number 15, we've got Acer Pomatum Kurohime.
Oh, great plant. I mean, this one's a no-brainer to be on a container list. Amazing colors, amazing color patterns. I love how it changes. Something we try to offer as frequently as possible here at Mr. Maple as well as Kurohime.
Yeah, I like it because it's a dense, compact dwarf, but has an upright habit. The new growth in the early spring can be almost like a pink color, like a pink purple. But my favorite time is during the summer when you get like this emerald blue-green color in the older growth and purple new growth across the top on the very new growth there in the summer. It just grabs your attention. And for a dense, compact, upright, it fits in a lot of small spaces, and it's even underrated on its fall color where you get some really nice shades of oranges to reds. It's very unique in the way it grows, and when people see a specimen of this, they kind of typically have to have it. And I know Brian recently got one of our 10 gallons we had and put it out in his garden just because when you see this tree out there, it grabs your attention, and it does that in a container very well because it stays so tight, dense, and compact.
That one seeds pretty regularly too. I might need to go visit him pretty soon. Amazing colorations on this one. I love it a lot for that midsummer change where you kind of get the pink new growth going on over the kind of greenish blue-green, emeraldy colored older growth. Newer tree from Japan, but underrated. I think it fits a lot of what people are looking for the container garden. It's got a lot of flash to it. It's still subtle. It's still a small shape. And, just kind of finishes perfectly into what you'd want a container plant to be. Again, another one's going to work zones 5 through 9 in the ground, but that smaller stature really, really makes this one perfect for the container garden. 4 to 5 feet, even in 10 years in the ground. So you're looking at something like 4 foot in the container and a nice little structure to it. Tends to be very much a U-shaped and a lot of density going on to it. So perfect structurally for the container garden as well. All right, guys, coming in here at number 14, we've got a classic lace leaf in Acer Palmatum dissectum, Orangeola.
Yeah, this may be one of the most popular trees on this list and has become one of the most popular trees that we have asked for here at Mr. Maple. Orangeola has just a crazy amount of colors of red new growth that goes like orange red to a red orange, then to a maroon. It goes through so many color changes throughout the season, and the new growth across it is continually orange red. And so often you'll get this multi-shade effect of red that is really pleasing to the eyes with Orangeola. And because of that, if someone has had an Orangeola in the garden, they move to another house, they go ahead and get another Orangeola for their other house. And then, maybe some other Japanese maples, but it often becomes that staple that they have to have in their garden. And this has just become a classic, that instant classic once it's been introduced to the nursery trade.
There's so many shades of this one in the early spring. It's got so many different colors going on in there. You'd be remiss to try to pick an exact color of Orangeola. It's got darker shades, all kinds of lighter shades. You've heard me say this a lot about this plant, but my favorite time for Orangeola is in summer. You get greener, older growth, red new growth, and then almost pinkish new growth on top of that. So you get this trifecta color going on in the late summer. I think that the fact that it greens up on the oldest growth is one of the most ornamental qualities about this, because you get just a plethora of changes. It makes it look really cool. This one also has a little bit more of a bell shape than an umbrella shape. So as a lace leaf, you're going to get a lot of that weeping characteristic. And in a container, some of that can even weep down a little bit lower than the container. So it's easy to stake up in the container if you want to keep it up above. But it makes a really dramatic, interesting plant without a lot of width to it. You can actually get a good bit of height by staking this one in the pot without a lot of width. So it makes it perfect for a small patio where you don't want a lace leaf that's going to get 4 to 5 feet wide. You can kind of stake this one up, kind of keep it in that tall, columnar, dramatic lace leaf category by continuing to stake some of the growth. Really a showstopper, though. I think you're going to love Orangeola if you're not familiar with it already. Couldn't talk about our favorite plants for containers without having it on the list.
Yeah, I remember seeing one of the original grafts from Happy Hollow Nursery that was at Balzer Nursery, and getting to experience one of the very first Orangeolas from the set and get to see the stature, the size, and just the overall shape was just amazing for me. Definitely one, if you don't have it, you need to get it. And once you get it, you're going to become addicted to it. And if you end up moving to other places, you'll probably get one again.
All right, coming in here at number 13, we've got the red line, Acer Palmatum Kurenai Jishi.
Now, Kurenai Jishi, this is a selection that was named by our friend Masayoshi Yano. Yano-san had, one of his friends had found this, and he put this name on it, which translates as Deep Red Lion.
Yeah, beautiful coloration on this. This one is one, that smaller stature at 3 to 4 feet, even in a 10-year period, is perfect for container gardening. I love the fall colors on it. That dark red color, though, in the spring. Just like that Kurohime, this one fades to an interesting color pattern. You can get some bright pink red new growth on the top, kind of going into some greener, older shades in the summer. In the early spring, the thing can just knock your socks off with a bold, dark maroon across the entire plant. And it's just a showstopper. Now, it is the red lion, and I think the time when it's most similar to the Shishi Gashira is actually in the fall color. This one mimics the Shishi Gashira in fall a good bit. I've had golden yellows with oranges and reds infused into that, just like you do with Shishi Gashira. So some great fall color, especially as these mature into larger specimens. They almost look coral-like. So you get that crazy kind of twisting foliage on top of it. Perfect for a container garden because that small stature, but that dense habit to it. You get a real talking piece in the container garden. Like, this is something people are going to definitely comment on in your garden.
My favorite time when you can get the best colors out of this is in that early springtime when you get some of those maroons. Right after the maroons start to fade a little bit, it gets to more of a brick red color. And to me, when that has that brick red color, and then you have the twisting leaves, of the typical lion's head Japanese maple, this one just grabs your attention quite a bit. It's a plant that collectors love because it stays dense. It's got a nice upright habit. It has a unique regal structure. The branches are thick. The leaves themselves are very sturdily put onto the branches. And it just grabs your attention and makes you want to have this tree in your garden.
It's like a muscle car. It's a small, bold statement. It's dense. It's full. It packs a lot of punch. It's got everything I love about a Japanese maple in a container. I think you're going to want Kuranagishi in your collection. So coming in here at number 12, we've got Golden Falls. Now, this one's unique in that it's kind of the Weeping Rayus style Katsura. I did a short on our channel a couple years ago where I hold up a spring color Katsura and a Golden Falls to show you how close the two are in the color spectrum. I actually think Golden Falls holds its color a little bit longer into the season, a little bit better than Katsura, so you get a lot of what you love there. This one can have kind of an orange tipped fingernail to that yellow, golden yellow foliage, smaller overall foliage, similar size foliage to Rayusen, but amazing spring displays. And it holds that yellow late in the season. This is a Talon Buchholz introduction that I think is super next level for a weeper. It gets about as big as you stake it. Typically we stake this one to 5 to 6 foot and let it weep down. So it's very malleable. The Rayus styles are incredibly shapeable, which make them perfect for container gardening. We could pick a whole list of these here. But this one works great for container gardening because you can make it into your own thing. I've seen people grow this one over a trellis. I've seen people make really unique structures in their container, kind of like lattice style, or even just making really interesting plateaus by staking this one. Because of its extreme pendulous nature, it can weep down lower than the container, but you can get as creative as you want with that also.
And give Golden Falls some sunlight. Morning sun, afternoon shade, really the best to really peak up the yellow color on Golden Falls. But if you think about something that's yellow like this, it's going to provide a dynamic contrast with almost any color pot that you put it in. If you put it in a brown pot, it's starkly different. You put it in a blue pot, wow, you got some really nice color changes between the yellow and the blue pot. And that's one of the things about many of these colorful Japanese maples. You can actually use the pot to accentuate the color, and you can stake these trees up to really have that dramatic fountain-like effect and keep these trees in the containers for their entire lives.
With something like Golden Falls, you can make this as wide as you want in the container. So you can actually get it up, make some crazy structures out of it. You can keep it fairly small and tall and narrow because of that malleable shape to it. I mean, it really, you can kind of get kind of artesian with this and make it as artistry as you want. You can make the shape look really funky, or you can keep a traditional Rayusen style and just continue staking it up and letting it weep down from there. But that also gives you a lot of space if you don't want it to get wide. By continually staking it up, you can have a fairly narrow container plant on a patio with a high impact color.
Now coming in at number 11, speaking of Rayusen, we've got Acer Pomatum Rayusen, also known as Rayuse. This is a selection by our friends at Kobayashi Momiji-en, and it is a game changer. It's hardy, vigorous, easy to grow, and it has that dramatic, heavily cascading shape that everybody loves and is so fun to play with in the garden.
So Rayusen's kind of the OG of those extreme pendulous styles. It's certainly a seedling from Jiro Shidari, which is a seedling from Nakakomoto Weepin. Now, both of those get a little bit wider. What's cool about Rayusen is its extreme pendulous nature will weep down lower in the container, but it'll also keep it very narrow when staked up. So you can play around with that shape and get really creative with it. Rayusen's a great plant for container gardening. I think it's going to add a splash of color. One nice thing about some of the greener ones, too, is if we're growing these in patios or areas where they're not getting as much sunlight, they're already a green plant, so they're not going to have to worry about them changing color. You're still going to get what you love about this one and the fall color changes in a heavier shade environment.
I love the fact that you can get creative with Japanese maples, especially in containers, and create your own unique design for a Japanese maple. When I saw Rayusen being used as a topsy-turvy at Kobayashi Momiji-en, growing out the bottom of a hanging basket with some annuals on top, it blew my mind. And then I realized that, you know, after they grow this tree as a topsy-turvy for years and they have this hanging down basket, so it's a very unique way to have a container, they can actually break the pot, remove the container, and flip the Japanese maple upside down and plant it in their garden, or put it in a bigger container, and then it looks like all of the branches have been staked because that extremely pendulous nature hardens off, and then you flip it over and all those branches and the leaves turn over, and then you've got this very unusual shaped Japanese maple in the garden.
So coming in here at number 10, we've got Acer Palmatum Seiho. This is a fun, compact dwarf. We joke that it's the oxymoron because it's a vigorous dwarf. They look vigorous when they're young, but then they slow down. So this one's going to be more of like a 5x5 globe shape, more of a small ball. One of the smallest leaf Japanese maples we do, very popular for bonsai because that pinchback method. It's got a tiny foliage to it. This one's also going to boast a really nice purple border to it in the early spring. The eye can almost be a yellowish with a bright purple border to it. It really stands out amongst the kohime types for shape because it has more of that rounded globe overall structure.
The name means paradise, and this one is just a beautiful little tree to put in the garden. It's great for fairy gardens. It's great for small places, but containers, it's ideal. It fills out the pot fairly quickly, makes a perfectly round shape, and is vigorous to do so. For a dense, small dwarf, this one stays very uniform in its stature. It's probably one of the most uniform small dwarfs that to date, and it gets out there and fills out the containers quickly. So it's a great production plant, but that also means it's a great plant for you in the garden in a container because it's going to make a beautiful tree fairly quickly, and then it's going to densen up with age.
Giving you more tips as we go along. One thing my mom does in her garden, and I think it's great, she has a lot of containers out in the ground, and they're amongst the other garden plants, but you might not notice this. She's dug down below the mulch level and put in bricks. So there's added drainage going on there. So if you look at the container in her garden, you might think it just marries up to the soil there, right where the mulch line is. But it's not actually true. She's actually mulched around the pot, and below that pot, there's 1 to 2 inches of drainage where those bricks are at. So you've got added drainage going on there. That's going to help those trees winterize and look better and not hold a lot of water. So she's got a little hole that kind of catches all under the plant and then continues to drain from there. Great way to improve your drainage on your plants out in your garden. So tons of rare and interesting Japanese maples in her garden mixed in to her trees in the ground. They don't require a lot of winter maintenance because that added little layer of drainage.
You know, and that's a great way to landscape your garden as well, because you can put Japanese maples in spaces in between that aren't permanently there. Mm-hmm. And then as your Japanese maples around them grow in the ground and fill out, you can remove those trees in the containers fairly easily and allow your Japanese maples more space to grow in the garden and move those trees in containers to other spots in your yard or your patio, your driveway, your pool. So many fun ways to have Japanese maples in containers. One of the other benefits about container growing Japanese maples is if you are moving, you can just put those in your U-Haul, take them to your next house. So fun way to grow Japanese maples in containers for sure. Coming in at number 9, we've got Acer Pomatum Kristen Star.
Awesome plant. One of the most showstopper spring plants you'll ever find. You've heard us talk about it a lot. Akane is a very popular tree from Japan, but it can be a little finicky. Kristen Star, a more durable tree that brings the same color patterns, if not better, than Akane. The original one found by Bill and Kristen Taylor down in Spartanburg, South Carolina. Tim and I have been growing this tree for over 15 years now, and we absolutely love it. It's something we offer frequently here at Mr. Maple. You're starting to see it get out there to all the other farms as everybody's finding out how amazing this one is for its color pattern. It is a bold orange with a yellowish eye in the early spring, which really just looks on fire. Now, its smaller stature really makes it perfect for a container garden where you want a high-interest, flashy plant.
I like it because it has a lot of lateral branches as it's upright. It doesn't have just your typical straight upright tree shape like something like Katsura or Winayama would have. It really spreads out as it grows, and because of that, it grabs a little more attention. It gets a little more shapely to it, and it also just stays in a smaller stature. Bill Taylor had been evaluating this for years in his garden, and he has a tree that probably has a 8-inch caliper on it in the ground. I mean, it's beautiful, short, dense, compact, and that's what you want in a container Japanese maple. Short, dense, compact naturally is more easy to manage, more easy to train, more easy to just enjoy its beauty because it's not overgrowing your container.
Your impact per foot on this one is almost unparalleled, right? If you've got a 3-foot one in a container, you're getting peak level interest out of your space. So it's going to bring a lot of drama to a little container. You can put this on a patio or planter, wherever your planter is going to be, and it's going to show out. I mean, you're not going to lose attention with this tree against a brick house, against a white house. There's really no background you can put this on.
It should go to the White House.
Right. It should be. This one, you're going to put it anywhere, though, and it's going to show out, and it's going to pull a lot of interest.
Kristen Star, one of the most colorful trees that we do on its color changes. And we've been offering it more and more here on Mr. Maple. Often when we would list it, it would sell out. But it's a great thing to look at and see how we've been able to increase production and be able to make more and more trees available. I think we've probably listed it 7 or 8 times this year on MrMaple.com and really been able to get a lot more people with Kristen stars in their gardens.
Yeah, if you don't see it on our website currently and you're falling in love with one of these plants on this list, you can always sign up to get notified. We add new plants every Tuesday and Thursday at 10 a.m. Eastern. We send out an email, and there's always something new happening here at MrMaple.com. So check those updates. We're always adding new plants, and things like Kristen Star come back pretty frequently.
Coming in at number 8 on our best container Japanese maples, we've got Acer palmatum red filigree lace.
Beautiful plant. Now, this one is one of the most thinly dissected foliages you'll ever see on a lace leaf. Looks really delicate, but it's a tough plant. Typically only about 3 feet tall by about 3 feet wide in a 10-year span. We've got a beautiful specimen at Buckholz. It's one of the biggest ones I've ever seen. There's some massive specimens that, 40-year-old kind of plants. But this one's a small stature. And one of my favorite things about this is it's one of the darkest red foliage. But guys, it does dark red foliage in heavy shade. So this one's special because the foliage stays around being a dark maroon, even in a low light setting.
Yeah, people often ask me, what's the difference between red filigree lace and red feathers? What's the difference between red filigree lace and ruby lace? Guys, red filigree lace holds its color even in deep shade. It may be a little more difficult for a grafter to produce, but it is hardy as all get out for you to grow. It's easy to grow. It does well in zone 5 because it's so slow growing. It's more cold tolerant. It's very drought tolerant. Don't overwater red filigree lace. So that's one of the things I see people do quite a bit is overwater. You got to realize it has really thin foliage. It doesn't need a lot of water.
Another tip I'll throw in here too for you people container gardening, be very conscious of the plants you put in your container with a dwarf like red filigree lace. It's a small, compact tree. Doesn't want a lot of root competition. So you want to be careful. I've seen people put Japanese yews, in container gardens with maples. Those are the type plants that are going to require all of the space very quickly. And so they're going to take up all that root ball. So be cautious of what you're putting around your red filigree lace that you're not over competing it.
On the same side of things, don't buy plants and put them with your Japanese maples that require a lot more water than your Japanese maple does. If you put something in there that's always needing more water and you're always watering frequently, your Japanese maple may get overwatered. So keep that in mind as well. Coming at number 7, we've got Acer palmatum kohime.
Classic dwarf Japanese maple here. Another one that's going to make kind of those little toadstool shapes is what we like to call them. Kind of that little mushroom kingdom kind of guy in Mario. It's going to be that compact little dome, bright purple border to it in the early spring. Not uncommon for these to get 3 to 4 feet tall in the container or in the ground, really. 3 to 4 feet tall by about 5 to 6 feet wide, making it a low plateau. Now, it looks amazing in a pot because it makes a perfect little topper with that dome for a container garden. You get all the drama you want. You really don't need any other plants with the little low width that a kohime is going to put on.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that's amazing about this tree is it's just tight, dense, compact habit. The really small leaves are especially show in that early springtime when you get that purple-red border. It looks like little flowers across the tree. And when you see this so uniformly across the tree, it just grabs your attention. Kohime is one of those trees that can be in containers for a really long time. A tip for container growing Japanese maples is about every 2 to 3 years, you should check your actual tree to see how much of the pot it is actually taken up. You can pull that tree out of the container, see if it's filling out the pot very nicely. Once it starts to get real thick and the roots are real thick, it starts to take up a lot of the soil. And when you're watering it, the water will actually flow through the soil very quickly and straight out the bottom. If you get to that stage, you may want to be thinking about putting your tree in a larger container, or during the next winter, you can actually go in and trim out some of the roots and put it back in the same container.
We typically recommend doing that root pruning in mid to late February. It's a great time to kind of assess where it's at. The trees are very forgiving going into the springtime, so you can make a little bit more of a change to the root ball. You don't want to do it once the sap's already high in the plant, so you want to catch it before the time when you'd be pruning. But a little bit before that, depends on where you're at winter-wise. Typically here in Western North Carolina, the right timing for us here is late February, mid to late February, right before we get into our March weather.
And you'll notice with kohime, we've only put kohime on this list. Murasaki kohime, Otohime, Tamahime, they all are slightly different. But we've sort of put kohime as sort of our placeholder on this list because it is one of the more common varieties. Any of those trees make great container plants. So we didn't leave them out because they all sort of fit in this spot with kohime. but they are slightly different. I mean, Kiyohime has a lot more lateral branching. Murasaki Kiyohime has a little more semi-upright shape. But each is their own different, unique tree. And Kiyohime just has this nice lateral shape, horizontal branching that really fits well in containers and can take space up laterally, but not a lot of space on the vertical side.
All right, guys, coming in here at number 6, we've got Acer Pomatum Shishi Gashira, a classic that's been around since the 1700s in Japan. We'd be remiss if this one wasn't on the list. You know, it's an upright, but it's still a stump plant for a lot of master gardeners. A lot of people are going to look at this and not realize it's a Japanese maple. It's got a dark emerald green coloration to the leaf, going to some of the best displays you'll ever see in the fall of golden yellow with oranges and reds infused in that. It's the lion's head Japanese maple is one of the common names, but it's named for a mythological lion in Japanese literature that's a female lion. Absolutely outstanding plant on durability. It's one you'll see frequently used in bonsai. Now, we have a whole list on top trees for bonsai, but this one's so popular for bonsai, we'd be remiss if we didn't also put it into our container plant list.
Now, this one has a rich green color to it, and the rich green color is very bold itself. When you see this in the garden, you almost think the color of some evergreens. I mean, the bold green shade of this is dynamic, but really what grabs your attention with Shishi Gashira is the texture of the foliage. You've got leaves that twist and curl that grab your attention. And I think texture is probably one of the least focused thing in the landscape. But when you use texture in the landscape like Shishi Gashira, it grabs your attention. It makes you realize how important that is to use in the garden. And Shishi Gashira, just with its tight, dense habit, the crinkled leaves, they grab you in. They draw your attention.
Great plant, really dynamic, high drama in the landscape. It's going to give you a different texture. You know, a lot of these we're talking about today mix really well together. So things like Oregon Sunset and Shishi Gashira, they're going to give you a dynamic contrast in your container garden of things that look completely different, but complement each other very well.
The fall color we mentioned before about the orange colors with Shishi Gashira, it's one of the most consistent fall colors of any Japanese maple. And the thing that's really impressed me about Shishi Gashira is that it gives phenomenal fall color in a container. I mean,
even in high heat zones, I've found it to do very well for fall color. And somewhere like Columbia, South Carolina, not always noted for being the beacon of fall color like we are here in Western North Carolina in a hot zone like that. I've seen phenomenal fall colors consistently on Shishi Gashira in Columbia, South Carolina.
And the other thing that's interesting about Shishi Gashira is this is a tree from the 1700s. This is a classic Japanese maple, but it's still a very popular tree today. And not just popular with, you know, it's very popular with collectors because it's still unique and different today. There's not a lot like it, and this tree grabs your attention in every garden. It's often one of people's favorite Japanese maples.
All right, y'all, coming in here at number 5, we've got the classic red broom. We've got Acer Pomatum Shaina. It's Hebrew for beautiful. Amazing plant, guys. Dark reds to pink new growth on it. Compact, dense, 4x5 ball. More of a dense, compact structure to it. Makes another one of those perfect toppers. A lot of people are looking for a red Japanese maple for their first one. Something like Shaina is going to show out and do perfect for the container garden.
Again, this is one of those trees that people often overwater. And it may get a little bit of a bad name because it doesn't need as much water as many of the other dwarfs even. Make sure you're not overwatering Shaina. It is a witch's broom, a tight, dense selection. And in containers, you know, you want to wet them and then let them dry out. Wet them, let them dry out. And that's key with Shaina. Shaina is phenomenally, it gives you good red color in the garden. In the spring, in the summer, and in the fall, it really lights up with some really nice shades of red to orange.
All right, guys, moving along. We're deep into the top 5 here. If you haven't already, make some notes to go back and shop on MrMaple.com for some of these great container plants. We love supplying you with just the best Japanese maples. At number 4, we've got Red Dragon. Now, we could have put Crimson Queen or many of the other lace leaves in here, kind of a placeholder for amazing red lace leaves. Red Dragon, though, people can say it, they can grow it, it's durable, it's heat tolerant, it's got everything you want in a red lace leaf.
One of the reasons I like Red Dragon versus many of the other red lace leaves for containers is its slower growing appearance. And it is very slow growing, but it also has a different branch structure than many of the other lace leaves. It is a little more upright and slow growing and has a really nice arching effect. The leaves themselves, though, they steal the show. you get some nice orange-red colors to the backside of the leaves when you give it some sunlight. So when the wind blows, this red lace leaf Japanese maple glows. And to me, it is the fire glow of the red lace leaves. It has that glowing effect that we're so proud about with fire glow, but it has that on a weeping red lace leaf. So naturally, to me, I think it's the best container red Japanese maple.
Beautiful tree, great red fall colors too. Bright picked up red fall color. A lot of people don't know this, but as you turn the leaf sideways, one of the reasons it could have the name is the leaf kind of looks like a Chinese bearded dragon. So you kind of get that bearded look with the leaf, little horns to ears on the top of it. Pretty cool when you show it to a kid. They'll remember it always and come back and check out your red dragon for that. Great plant though, and frequenter here at Mr. Maple. Now let's move on a little bit. We're down to the top 3. It's getting pretty heated. Any one of these really could have been my number 1. So I really like these. Tim and I do for containers. Rhode Island Red, hard to not see that at number 1, because that's one of the ones I think about when I think about a tree in a container.
But you got that coming in at number 3 right now.
Yeah, it's hard to not see it at number 1 though. I mean, I could I go back and forth with these top 3. Perfect tree for containers. When I think about this one, I think about it in a container. It's the dwarf bloodgood. It's a 5x5 ball, very dense and round. It's going to give you a perfect round canopy. It's going to give you the larger foliage like a bloodgood. It's going to give you great bright red fall color. Just makes a perfect container plant. You don't really have to prune this or do anything to it. Just let it do its thing in a pot, and it kind of just does the perfect container plant for what a lot of people are looking for that, that accentuation of their pot. They've got a decorative pot and they want that ball on top of it. Rhode Island Red's going to fit that to a T.
A lot of people's first inclination when they think of a Japanese maple is a bloodgood Japanese maple. Mm-hmm. This larger red upright tree. And when they put this tree in the ground, sometimes they don't want that larger tree. They want a dwarf. And you see them out there shearing the tree with shears. You see them trying to keep it dense and compact. And Rhode Island Red, which was found by Rhode Island nurseries, is a plant that gives that natural shape, that dense, compact shape of a bloodgood style Japanese maple, but it's in a denser, compact form. So if you're looking for a bloodgood for a container, why do that? Do a Rhode Island Red. You've got a tree that's going to fit better in a container, have a better shape. And, I first saw this at NJ Acer's and his blue container, and my mind was just like, this is the perfect container Japanese maple when I saw that. And you realize this is just a game changer when it comes to red dwarfs.
Perfect structure, perfect container plant. All around, it's going to be everything you need in that pot. You really won't need a lot of decorative stuff to go with it, because in time, it's just going to be a really nice globe shape on top of your pot, and it's going to bring you all the color patterns you need. So really just a groundbreaking plant here for the container gardener.
Coming in at number 2, we've got Acer Pomatum Pink Princess. This is a selection that was found by our friend Carl Munn on the cultivar Shishi. This nice dense witch's broom on a tree he had out at his nursery. And being, that didn't really fit his mold for his customers, he took cuttings off of that tree and mailed them to Matt and I and allowed us to put the name Pink Princess on it. And it gets the name Pink Princess because Shishi and Pink Princess have that really nice pink color in the early spring, that border, before it turns to the creamy white.
Yeah, this one really is a unicorn. It's one of the only variegated witch's brooms to date in any plants, especially Japanese maples. It's very rare to find a plant that's both a broom and variegated, making this one extremely unique among ornamental plants. That dense, compact stature of it's going to make it a 5x5 ball, so more of a small globe shape, and it stays more stable than Shishi. We find it to be one of the most stable forms, which really impresses us. Much like Seiho, this one tends to be a vigorous dwarf, gets out there a little bit at first, kind of fools people because it looks like it's going to be vigorous, but it tightens up and stays very dense and compact. Around the time Carl was getting this to us was around the time my first daughter was being born. It was around 8 years ago, and we were really impressed with that. And I guess I was thinking about having a daughter. Pink Princess really kind of stuck out to me. We brought the name up to Carl, and Carl said, I don't want to offend Talon Buchholz. Is it too close to Japanese Princess? So he said, as long as Talon says it's not too close to Japanese Princess, I like the name. And so we called Talon and we said, Talon, is Pink Princess too close to Japanese Princess? And he said, by no means, I love it. So we got some to him. He's been growing it out there at Buchholz ever since. Works out good for us now that we're owners of Buchholz Nursery. But I love Pink Princess. Again, it has a little bit to do with my family, but I love the tree. I mean, Shishi has always been one of Mom's all-time favorite plants. So her first grandbaby's plant got named as the broom on Shishi or Beni Shishihenga there. I find it to be an improved form of Beni Shishihenga. I mean, honestly, it's hard for me to grow Beni Shishihenga now having this plant. I love both, but this is more durable, more variegated, more stable, and more compact. So it gives you everything you want in a small little stature, bringing high drama to the container garden. I mean, who doesn't want a dwarf compact tree like Matthew, but then variegated like Beni Shishihenga? It's almost a creative player, right? It's got everything you want. It sounds unreal to me. I absolutely love it because it incorporates so many different aspects of Japanese maples all into one tree.
Yeah, I know we'd all the time be on the road with maple collectors going to visit nurseries, and people would say, man, I want to find that Shishi Gashira that's weeping and variegated. And that's basically, you're throwing you're throwing three different things together. Like, I'd like to find that witch's broom that's variegated. That's what you're doing.
When are you going to have the Tamukiyama with yellow bark? It's like, well, you can't just make stuff up. That's not how nature works. That's like Harrison Ford in the last Star Wars. That's not how the Force works. That's not how it works. But with Japanese maples, this one feels like a creative player. It feels like something you just kind of customed up. Like, I think I'd like a Beni Shishihenga, but I'd like it to be shaped like a Shaina. Like, that sounds ridiculous, right? But it's real. I mean, I think as this one gets out there, it's going to become more and more popular as one of those next level plants. It could have been my number one. Again, Rhode Island Red or this could fight for my top spot. You could talk me into either of these, but I think Pink Princess, one of the most next level dwarfs for container gardening, especially for people that like variegation.
Yeah, and on top of that too, it has small leaves. The leaves are a little bit smaller than Beni Shishihenga, which we don't talk about enough. And because of that, I think this one would make a killer bonsai. This is one on our list of trees that people don't really know about that they should do for bonsai because it's dense, compact habit. It keeps putting out a lot of branches, so it's easy to work with. The smaller leaves. I know they normally don't work a lot with variegated plants, but they should.
Right.
And this is one of the ones they should do it with because it's awesome.
All right, we're all the way down to number one. You could probably guess. It comes in one on a lot of our lists, especially for top sales plants of the year. And we're cheating here because we're going to throw in Makawi Atsubusa at number one, but we're also going to throw in a lot of its progeny. So, I mean, a lot of things like Red Panda, Koi, Japanese Princess would fit into the same beneficial use for container gardening. Now, Makawi Atsubusa is the most classic. It's durable, it's bulletproof, it's heat tolerant. You get those red petioles leafing out on it in the early spring that just knock your socks off on that green foliage. Looks like a Muppet. It's got everything you want going on. It feels like something that might talk to you in the landscape. I mean, they have that ethereal quality where they feel like something, a little bit alive in the garden. They kind of have that liveliness to the garden. You feel like there's a lot of plants in your landscape, but when you walk into a spring garden, you feel like that Makawa might talk to you a little bit. Like, it feels a little bit like a little bit more of an enchanted creature.
I've heard a lot of people, now there's a Japanese maple named Dr. Seuss, but a lot of people say Makawi Atsubusa looks like something straight out of a Dr. Seuss book.
It also has a little bit of that Kermit the Frog coloration and foliage to it. A lot of sharp lines.
It does. It's this lively creature in the garden and just puts these little arms out, just tightly layering. It looks like a little bonsai naturally in the garden as well with its shape. Because of that, Makawi Atsubusa seedlings are really popularly used for bonsai as well. If you love Makawi Atsubusa and you love all this, check out our videos on the Makawa family collection. We basically go through and drop and talk about each of the progeny of Makawi Atsubusa that have tightly layering habit and variation. Some of these are variegated sports. Some of these are pink or red or yellow seedlings from Makawi Atsubusa. Check out those videos. We've got a whole series on the Makawa family collection on our YouTube channel.
So people come to me frequently and they say, I want a bonsai tree. I want a bonsai Japanese maple. What's your bonsai tree? And a lot of people that aren't familiar with bonsai will use that as kind of a catch-all term, right? They want a bonsai tree, and they don't know that most Japanese maples can be turned into a bonsai aesthetic. They can be grown into a bonsai. And instead of explaining everything now, I just point out Makawi Atsubusa because it does everything naturally that people want in a bonsai. So you can kind of put a Makawa in a big container, have an amazing structured plant that's going to be tight shingled layering, unique branching. You're going to look like Mr. Miyagi here. You're going to look like a genius because the thing looks cool no matter what you do. You just plant it and let it grow. It's already going to have all these crazy structures to it. It's already going to make these little arms. It's going to do everything you want to be check out my container plant, which isn't a bonsai. You can have a nice sized pot, but it's going to look like something you've manicured and turned into an amazing shaped plant. So just tell them you're an expert and you prune this every day for hours, because Makawa is going to naturally create such a great shape for the container garden.
And if you love Makawa Atusa, as we do, you're going to have to go check out our video on the biggest Makawa Atusa in the world at Buckholtz Nursery. That's also on our YouTube channel. We call it and we go through and talk about the Makawa Atusa seedling factory, where we're growing so many different seedlings from Makawa Atusa. It is one of our favorite Japanese maples overall. So it's kind of obvious that this one would come in number one, because we love Makawa Atusa.
Well, it just fits what people are looking for the container garden too. I mean, you can grow the entire Makawa collection in containers on a patio and not take up tons of room for a long time. You can enjoy a lot of these smaller structured plants and have all these little crazy. I mean, you might get investigated by the cops if you got more than 5, but they might not look like Japanese maples sometimes, but they're amazing plants. I love that Heather Strong has the label on her big Makawa in the yard that says "not marijuana" on the label, so that people don't steal her Makawa Atusa. I left one time in a hotel room in a 10-gallon, and I didn't put the "Do Not Disturb" sign out, so I can just imagine that lady walking in to clean the room and going, this, like 5-foot Makawa in a container in the spring, in the sitting on the desk. It was actually sitting up on a desk, so I'm sure she thought, I've found the honey hole here for somebody's marijuana habit. But an amazing plant, guys. You're going to love Makawa because it's got a characteristic unto itself, and you don't have to do anything. Like, it just makes a great plant on its own. Yeah, it's a beauty. It's one of our favorites. It was one of the very first maple of the year with the North American Maple Society. And that means that for collectors, people who have large collections of Japanese maples, it was their favorite. It's durable, it's easy, it's beautiful, and it's a tree that makes a fantastic container plant. Guys, if you love these kind of podcasts, give us a 5-star review on your favorite podcast platform. A lot of people listen to us on Spotify or Pandora. We're out there on a lot of different things. Go find us, give us a 5-star review. That helps other people find us. If you like that we provide 7 days a week of Japanese maple related content, we got a full team here creating this content. It takes a whole team to edit these podcasts, to edit the videos, to get this content out to you. Consider supporting us on MrMaple.com. We could definitely use your business. And if you're enjoying this content, it's a great way to get more content, because we'll just keep creating for you guys. So we put out these podcasts every single week. They appear in their audio format on Saturdays, and then they appear on the video format on YouTube on Sundays. Take care. God bless. And have a great day.